Screen here. Okay. So Sharice, are we good? Can you see everything?
Yeah, it
Okay,
looks good.
great. All right. So just generally give you guys a little bit of background on myself. Obviously, as Sharice said, I'm an attorney at Extraordinary Law. I own the firm. I have over 15 years of special education and disability work. I have been in the field working both as a social worker and as an attorney. So at our firm, we work and advocate for students, families of students who have special education needs or disability needs. We help with all aspects of special education from early intervention to college age services. We deal also with disciplinary issues, which is an interesting issue when you talk about disabilities and discipline. One of the biggest things we do, and one of the things that we love doing the most, is educating and empowering parents. So activities like today, working with DSAP to be able to educate parents is one of the things I love most about my job, is being able to help you guys into learning your rights under the law and helping you to feel educated enough so that you can advocate for your child on your own. And then, of course, we are attorneys, so we do litigate these cases as needed against districts when districts are not providing appropriate special education supports. When I say districts, that does include charter schools because those are districts. So I am going to, as Sharice said, we're going to focus on meaningful progress and extended school year services today. So the way I'm going to start this out is I'm going to give you a little bit of the black letter law so you understand what the law actually says about meaningful progress and extended school year services. And then we're going to have a discussion, hopefully, a little bit about the actual program and what that actually means in application for your student. So, under federal law, the districts are required to provide you with an IEP that includes a statement of the present levels of the child's academic achievement and functional performance, and a statement of the measurable annual goals. This includes any kind of functional goals that are needed for the child's disability to the child's disability, and it must enable the child to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum and meet each of the child's other educational needs that result from the child's disability. So when we say each of their other needs, that means, are we talking about speech and language services, occupational therapy services, excuse me, physical therapy services, behavioral health, emotional support, the whole child, not just a child in a vacuum of can they read, write, do math, but the whole student, what do they need overall to make progress? This includes a description of the child, how the child's progress will be measured towards meeting the annual goals, and when the periodic reports of progress will be provided. So that's what the law says. But what actually makes a goal good? Um, we get these documents. I'm going to assume I see some of the names look a little bit familiar. I'm going to guess. I can't see faces, so I think I know a couple of you on the Zoom today. But I think most of you are coming as parents or professionals working in the field. So you've seen IEPs before. You get this typically a pretty dense document that in the middle of the document you have these goals and they have a lot of verbiage what actually makes it good and what makes that goal meaningful and compliant with the law. First and foremost, the goal's got to make sense. You got to be able to understand it. What does that goal mean to you and what does that actually mean in application for your child? It's got to be measurable, so something that you can see, oh, this is exactly how we're going to measure if my child is making progress here. And it must include a baseline. You must be able to know, where did my child start in this area and where are they going? I like to include this chart because I want you to always think about when you're looking at a goal, when you read a goal, when you get an IEP, when you get a revision, or however, wherever you are in the process of an IEP program, can you take your child's goal and say, oh, when we drafted this goal, they were here. And over the course of the year, I can draw a chart. How did they do? Did they come down and dip, or do they come back up? Did they plateau? How did your student actually do on that, measuring that goal? Here is an example of a goal that would be measurable, understandable, and includes a baseline. So when given a 5 multi problems increase in his baseline of 60%. So we know they started at 60% accuracy to 80% accuracy when averaged bi-weekly through the IEP team. So this tells me that our goal is 80%. They started at 60%, and that we're going to be measuring that goal on a bi-weekly basis, which means over the course of a 9-week period, you should be getting at least 4 data points that tell me how my child did on that progress. Also, very commonly in the state of PA, our quarterly progress reports is the way districts provide your progress reports, meaning your data on your IEP. This is, I think, in some districts or for some families, it's kind of misunderstood. You get a report card for your child, and in our early elementary kiddos, we get a lot of writing. We get a document that has, Johnny does really well with peers, listens to directions, sit in their seat. That's their report card. That's what every student gets. Their progress monitoring is their IEP progress. How did they do on their IEP goals? So for this example, you would get if your school does quarterly progress reports, with your report card, you also get a quarterly progress monitoring report that's going to provide you data on this. So like this example in this chart that I have here would provide these trials, and it would show, okay, Johnny started at 60%, and on trial 1, he went down to, 55%, and then 70, 68%, and then maybe a 72%. Those were his trials. So over the course of the period, here is the average performance for that student. That's a progress or progress in moving forward for Johnny, or it's a regression. So you should be getting those with your report cards. Some of the schools in our Commonwealth do trimesters. So you will get them with report cards. The statute does say you need to be getting them at least as frequent as report cards. So if your school, very, very rarely do we have schools in the Commonwealth that do semester report cards, but it is possible that your district does that, and that you would have a progress report only at twice a year. But generally speaking, whenever you get a report card, you should be also getting data related to your child's goals. So that's what you should be looking for. But what does it actually mean for meaningful progress and what your child is entitled to under the law? An IEP must provide a child with a free and appropriate public education. This is a buzzword. I'm sure you've heard it a lot. FAPE. It's been defined under the law as significant learning and meaningful benefits. That meaningful benefit means, what does that mean for my individual child? It must be reasonably calculated for a child to make progress in light of their circumstances and appropriately ambitious in light of that child's position. So, for example, we want to remember that meaningful progress doesn't mean the same thing for every kid. We're not going to have in a mold that your child fits into. Remember, individualized education plan means it's individualized. It's based on your kid's needs and your kid's program. So if your student is a student with a specific learning disability, we might be looking for progress in their ability to increase reading fluency. And we're expecting them just to increase every year and move forward. And that may not be the same for a student with an intellectual disability. That progress is going to be measured differently, and it's going to be based on their academic performance, their disability category, also just their disability factors, the different things that come into play. A student with a speech and language impairment, as well as a specific learning disability or in reading, might progress at a different pace than a child with just a specific learning disability in reading. Because there's a lot that go into these things. There's a lot of comorbidity with disabilities. So we want to make sure you understand that FAPE for your student is just what your student does, okay? It's how it makes sense for your kiddo. A lot of times what we see for students that are intellectually disabled, I think that a lot of families, when I'm working with families, a lot of the families that I have come to me with frustration for their students with more significant disabilities is they say, well, this isn't progress for my kid. The district is telling me that they are making progress, but I don't think this is progress. Just because my kid said hello 5 times in the course of a day doesn't mean meaningful gain for my kid. The district says they're doing great, but that's because they're lovable and fun and not a behavioral problem. For you, you believe your child has potential to do more academically. So that is something that, we have to look at and monitor and make sure that our goals are appropriately ambitious while also not selling your kiddo short. Um, for other children that are nonverbal, for example, a nonverbal child that initiates conversation and says hello 5 times in a day, that might actually be a really great thing for that child. So it's something that we really have to look at and think about. And it should be a real IEP conversation of like, what are we doing when we develop this goal? I think many times districts provide you with an IEP and they have the goals all in there for you. It's just a template. It's just a document. They give you 40 minutes to look at an IEP and you're just told, oh, these are the goals. And there's no back and forth discussion. As a parent, you got to remember that you can always say, excuse me, can we talk about this some more? Does this goal make sense for my child? Is this goal reasonably ambitious for my child? Does this match their ability and their profile and what they can do in this school year? Let's make sure that we are setting them up for success and our program is going to help them move forward in an ambitious way that they can actually achieve. Does anybody have any questions so far on meaningful progress and formation of goals? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. So again, I want to kind of go through this a little bit in more detail, and I would love for anyone to kind of engage with this process and tell me what it means for your kiddos. So meaningful progress for a student in regular education, what they're going to, what districts will say, what the law has said, and what has kind of been, formulated is that a regular education student, meaningful progress or FAPE is progression in your classes and moving through each grade level appropriately. So a child's ability to perform in the curriculum, achieve appropriate grades that they are passing, and pass through each grade. That is a regular education student. That is not our student with disabilities. One thing to remember is that your child with a disability just moving grade to grade does not necessarily mean FAPE. And I think, I don't know who we have on the room here, if anyone's experienced that, but I know I've talked to parents many times before that say, well, my kid keeps passing, but I don't see that they've made any changes or any progress. That's because passing doesn't necessarily equate to FAPE for a child with a disability. So a student with specific learning disability in reading, on average, depending on the severity, expecting that a student's going to progress about 1 grade level in their targeted area of need would be appropriate, meaningful progress. Meaning, if you have a child with a disability in reading and they've been on the same reading instruction level for 2 school years, possibly denial of aid. They are possibly making not appropriate progress, that it would not be meaningful for your child. We should be able to close the gaps as much as possible and make gains. Obviously, this is information these are just examples, not explicit to anybody's personal situation. But this is, on average, or again, generally speaking, you should expect that kind of progress. A student with intellectual disability or ID, a student that is making progress in their goals and working towards independence and self-sufficiency, that would be meaningful for your child. So being able to see that they have increased their ability to be more independent, being able to gain real life math skills or improve their reading skills overall, those would be examples of that child making progress. As well as just general progress on their goals overall for, again, all areas of need, not just academic. So behavioral, emotional, social, all of those should go into play as we're talking about a child's ability to make meaningful progress and have access to faith. Before I go forward, I wanted to put in a cursory statement. I know that I should probably say this in the beginning. I'm giving you guys all over an overview of the law and application. I'm going to go over examples and everything. None of this is individualized or advice, legal advice for anybody. This is just education for everybody. So I just want to make sure I kind of put out my cursory statement that every child situation is different. And I just want to make sure you guys have the legal guidelines here for you to understand. This is another example. I think I already mentioned this one. A nonverbal student, meaningful progress would be, increased verbalizations that are meaningful. So again, like I said, a student that is completely nonverbal, going from saying nothing throughout the course of the day to saying, 5 times in a day, engaging in spontaneous speech, that might actually be meaningful progress for you. Obviously, that would not be the same for a student that is fully verbal. That would not be meaningful progress for that student. So moving on a little bit to extended school year. Again, let's talk about what the law says. This is dense, but I want to make sure you understand what extended school year is underneath the law. So the federal law explains that public agencies must ensure that extended school services are available as necessary to provide FAPE to a student. It's if the IEP determines it on an individualized basis to provide FAPE. And this is that part, section 3, I think is really important for us to look at. A public agency or a district cannot limit the extended school year services to particular categories of disabilities, meaning they can't say only kids with intellectual disabilities can qualify for extended school year, or only students with specific learning disabilities can go to this program. They cannot limit in any way. They also cannot unilaterally limit the type, amount, or duration. And this is, I think, a sticky point that we're going to talk about at some length here, is that districts at times will say, hey, your child qualifies for extended school year. Here's the program. And they roll out what you're going to see moving forward, my standard ESY program. I say quotes because no one uses that language, but that's how I refer to it, as districts will have a program where they say, this is what ESY is. It's X number of days, X number of hours, this date, here you go, here it is. They can't do that under the law. They can't just say ESY equals this. It has to be an IEP discussion. And ESY, what does it actually mean? I think we all kind of colloquial use extended school year, but I don't know that anyone ever defines exactly what that means. It must be beyond the normal school year of the district. It must match the child's IEP, and it cannot cost you any money as a parent. So I feel like some schools we've seen since COVID have started doing like summer camps for students. They'll actually call them like summer camp or camp adventure or whatever it might be, where any child can apply to it and you can go, but you got to transport your child and you got to pay a certain fee. That is not extended school year. That would be an additional program that is not under the child's IEP. So the federal law gives our states those guidelines, and then specifically in PA, we have a definition of how your IEP team considers it. So a lot of families will say, well, I don't even know how I qualify for that service. This is a part of my IEP. Again, we get an IEP. I think average IEPs are 25 plus pages. We're looking at like page 21, usually for ESY, somewhere in the very end of the document. Usually by the time you get to that document in an IEP meeting, everybody is fatigued and everyone's like, all right, moving forward. I'll have conversations with families where they say, we never even talked about it. I didn't know they qualified. They just told me they didn't qualify. This is what's actually required for an IEP team to decide a student does or does not qualify for ESY. So there are these 7 factors for ESY qualification. No one of these 7 factors are, determinative. It's a full view of the student. I'm not going to read these for you. You guys can read these. And of course, I'm going to give the information to Sharice afterwards, so you guys can refer to them later if you would like as well. But you have the right to have a conversation. The most common ones parents see are number 1 and 2, regression or recoupment. And those are a measurement of how much your child regresses during periods without school, and recoupment, meaning if they regress, how quickly do they recoup those skills, how fast, which would cause concern for large absences in school. So, for example, if we have data that shows my child regresses between Christmas and New Year's or winter recess, and it takes them a month to recoup, we'd be very concerned because that would mean we've now lost a month of what that child could have made of progress, right? They if they wouldn't have had that interruption in school, it's going to take even longer to recoup. So every school year, we're then going to have 2 months of recouping where we were last year. So the child's never going to have a full opportunity to progress. That would be a really good example of a reason why a child requires extended school year services. The last category, obviously, I'm presenting for DSAP. So, I mean, I assume that a lot of you have students with pretty severe disabilities or be categorized as also individuals who might have intellectual disability. Number 7 is a category that says the student's disability is so severe, such as autism, serious emotional disturbance, severe intellectual disability, generative impairments with mental involvement, and severe multiple disabilities. If we have a student with severe intellectual disability or really just intellectual disability, they're going to qualify for an Armstrong, what we call our Armstrong target group. That has been defined through case law. Excuse me, as those group of students that are going to require those services, and the team really needs to look closely at those students because those are the students most likely to struggle with long breaks in services that are going to require extended school year services. So because that's a big focus, and I want to make sure I define that to you, there are actually explicit rules for our children within what we call the Armstrong target group. The timing of this presentation, I think, is key here. And Sharice and I talked about that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation today in February is we're going to talk about this. The timeline for extended school year for our students with severe disabilities is coming up. And there is a deadline for all districts to review those students' IEPs and decide if they are qualified for extended school year services. So in the state of PA, those students in that category we just discussed, it's defined right here, they must be notified by your school district for a meeting to review extended school year services. The meeting must occur no later than February 28th for those students with severe disabilities. I want to make sure I highlight that. A lot of times this is practice, and please, again, stop me, interrupt if you have a question about this. A lot of times families will get an email, just a shot off email. Hey, so-and-so qualifies for ESY again this year. See attached NORAP. Let me know if you have any questions. And that's it. While that might be appropriate because you agree and you know the service and you accept that program, you guys have done a program that you like, you love it, it's great. But it might not be appropriate if you actually wanted to have a conversation. It's always appropriate for you to say, great, thanks for the information. Can we actually talk about this? Can we have a conversation? Can we explore more options? I want to know. The same way that it's okay for you to say, hold on, you told me my child doesn't qualify. I think they do. I want to talk about this with an IEP team. This is not a special education teacher individual in a silo conversation. This is a team discussion of does my child meet the qualifications under the state law to qualify for extended school year services? Once your team meets and you have a discussion regarding the program, the placement, the options, the qualification overall, they must issue a NORAP or a notice of recommended educational placement that says what the team has decided. Either the child has been approved for ESY or the child has not been approved. And usually that NORAP was also going to state what you actually agreed upon. So ESY services at the district for these dates, da, 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 da. I'm going to show you an example of a NORAP here later in the conversation. So this is a little bit clearer. But that NORAP has to be issued by March 31st for those students in that target group of those severe disabilities. This includes students who transfer. So I want to make sure that is clear. So you have a kiddo with a severe disability, you move to a district in March, and when you transfer to that new district, the district goes, hey, actually, there's no ESY qualification on your IEP. There's no NORAP recently. We're concerned about ESY. You should be able to call a meeting, or I'm sorry, you are able to call a meeting at that moment and say, hey, we need to talk about ESY. I'm not sure what we're doing for summer because we haven't talked to you yet. We are new to the district. Let's discuss this. You are entitled to that even if you move after that date. So that's something that I think sometimes parents assume if the prior district did something, that the new district will just automatically do it or will reject it. So we need to have the conversation. What should you expect in this process? Again, meeting, ESY meeting. This is a conversation with the IEP team. We are not saying Miss Sally, our special education teacher, unilaterally made a decision that my child does or does not qualify for ESY services and didn't have a conversation with the team. This also goes to discuss goals. So when we talk about ESY, there are, I think, many times it's kind of a global conversation of, do they qualify for ESY? But there's not a conversation about they qualify for ESY, but for 1, 3, and 5 of their 8 goals, right? Goal 1, goal 3, goal 5. Well, why not goal 2 and goal 4, right? That IEP team meeting is also key to discuss what are you actually focusing on in ESY. That's also going to help you discuss what does the appropriate program look like. Okay. So again, discussing all the available program options, a general assumption that your child's going to go in district for the ESY program should not be accepted. For some children, that's great. For a lot of kids, that's great. And the district program can meet their needs. For other children, a lot of our children with severe disabilities, it's not necessarily the most appropriate program, and that conversation needs to happen so that we're not being just thrown into a standard program with IEP goals that we haven't discussed. So we haven't discussed, is this make the most sense for me as a parent, my concerns for my child's regression or for their most important skills? Is that aligned with the ESI program that the district is proposing? And again, a NORAP provided to you by March 31st with what the discussed ESY options were and giving you the option to accept or reject the ESY program as proposed. This is all of the timeline information and expectations for the NORAP. Does anybody have any questions about what I've talked about before? I feel like I'm just talking at you guys, so I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions or concerns. Okay. Again, please feel free to interrupt. Okay. Okay, so ESY is, like I said, I call it our standard program. Many districts in the Commonwealth have a program that they very frequently use for students for extended school year. It typically is about 3 weeks in July, especially because that 4th of July kills us every year, depending on when it falls. So it is typically 3 to 4 weeks in the month of July. It's typically a limited number of hours a day. So you'll see either 9 to 12 or 12 to 3, kind of just random hours. And it's at the district with other students with disabilities. So when we talk about general faith, we typically talk about the element of the least restrictive environment and inclusion in a general education population or students that are non-neurodiverse. So when we talk about an ESY program, a typical ESY program is going to be a program with all students with disabilities. That's the way you get into the program. Very commonly, the ESY program is going to be a strict focus of academics. So basic reading, basic math. So if your child is, again, we talked about generally students with specific learning disabilities, If your child has a specific learning disability and was getting an intervention program, they're likely going to be continuing that intervention program, or at least reviewing skills that were mastered throughout the school year, as well as a continuation of related services. This last point I want to point out again, this is a conversation when we talked about in the last slide of, really discussing your goals for extended school year services. Continuation of related services, that is a IEP team decision. So a lot of students, we talk about related services. That is your speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, hearing, vision services. So what of those services need to be continued over the summer to make sure your child doesn't have that regression or difficulty coming back to the school year? And so some of those might not all be applicable. A lot of families, especially families with significant disabilities, over the summer we go back to our outpatient therapists for those services, to have a higher frequency, because during the school year we're just kind of tapped out at the end of those school days. So doing all day with school and then going to 3 or 4 related services after school and outpatient is too much. So over the summer we do a lot of that. So you might decide the related services are not as important over the summer, but also those service as in provided by the district. But those services deciding, does my child get speech? Do they get OT? Do they get PT? That should be a conversation the IEP team is discussing, as well as the frequency. Again, a standard program, they're going to give you a set number of sessions each summer, and that conversation should be able to be explained. It should not be, this is what ESY is. This is why Johnny is getting it. The conversation should be, oh, okay, so Johnny has XYZ needs. Here is how we propose we fill that need and help them through the summer. Here's what we're offering. One point I do want to highlight on this, while obviously there's a lot of creativity or conversations that should be happening about what ESY means to your child, ESY under the law is not required to continue to make leaps and bounds in programming. What it is to prevent regression and maintain progress, okay? So is your student likely to make a giant jump in progress over the summer? Not likely. We're usually looking at the ability for that ESY program to keep the child on the path they would be on but for the break in school year, okay? So we're talking about maintaining those skills and being able to maintain engagement in this school setting. Any questions regarding that? Okay. So we talked about, I gave you the quote standard program. What other options are there? I'm going to give you a list of several. Again, this information is going to be available. There should be individualized programs for your student needs. Again, focusing on the area that the team identifies as your biggest area of concern. So what is the most meaningful for your child over the summer? Remember, as the statute told us, the program is not focused on the districts providing it or the ease of the district providing it, but what makes sense for your student. So it can't just be, this is the program that's most convenient for us as a district, so this is what you're getting. Here are some examples of when the standard program may not work. So we're talking about the standard program being a program that's primarily academics, all with students with disabilities. Your students' biggest areas of needs are related to behavioral and emotional regulation and appropriate social skill development. A lot of our kids that have social skill development needs are not going to do well or not going to make progress in those goals in an environment that is only students with other social skill deficits. They need typical students to bounce those skills off, to practice. They need models. So a fully disabled program would not necessarily be appropriate for them. Also, your student struggles with change of schedule and requires a full day program for acquisition of skills and maintaining school engagement. So there's a lot of kiddos that we work with, or that really a big part of the summer program is really talking about when we do all these transitions, what they did 3 hours for these 3 days a week for these 3 weeks, and then they had nothing, and then they had 4 weeks of absolutely nothing, and then I did a vacation or whatever it is. All those transitions are really hard for my kid. and maintaining a full day to keep their stamina up, but also keep them engaged is really what they need. Otherwise, they regress being able to manage that full day. Is something that'd be appropriate for exploring a non-traditional program. Um, One thing I want to, kind of highlight here, a full day program can't be needed because parents need it for consistent childcare or daycare. That is one of the things that I have that reality conversation with parents a lot of like, Brandi, how the heck am I going to get my kid to ESY for 2 hours a day? Like, it just doesn't work with my work schedule. And I say, I hear you. That sounds insane. Trying to manage that is crazy and stressful. But if it doesn't make sense for your child's academic needs or educational needs to be in a full day program, it's a really hard argument to say, well, mom and dad just can't make it work. We have the conversation with the team to figure out how to make it work, and what program would make more sense. But if it is purely we need a different program based on the ability to have childcare, that is not going to get you a more intensive program. So I like to kind of highlight that for parents. So how do you get a different program? So the district gives you a NORAP and they say, hey, we're going to give your child the standard program. Here it is. Sign it. Let me know if you have any questions. Well, what should you do? Ask those questions. Why are you recommending this program? How will this help my child's needs in this area? Have we considered any other options besides the district standard ESY program? What have you done, district, to make sure that this is the most appropriate program for my child? What does your data show is the biggest area of need? Sometimes, I mean, candidly, I think sometimes we have these conversations and the teachers are caught off guard because they have been taught, or it just become a kind of a process. Oh, February 28th, I got this NORAP out, and I just say, yep, they qualify for ESY. And they don't even look at these conversations, these points, these questions, because they're just checking the box that I strategically made sure this NORAP and this conversation happened before November, February 28th. So when you ask, what's the data show? They go, oh no. They say, oh, well, when we had our IEP meeting originally, we said reading and math were the targets. Well, are those the biggest targets now that we had 4 months of IEP services? Or has the child changed and modified? Have our needs morphed a little bit into where the child is right now? So being able to have that conversation and ask those questions is going to be your first and foremost tool in your toolbox to make sure you're getting the program that's appropriate and best meets your child's needs. This one I really like. I use this one for students who are maybe looking for a more social immersion kind of experience for the summer. So a lot of our students with autism that have pretty intensive social and emotional deficits or behavioral deficits, we talk about, what is the skill that we're really struggling to apply? We've been really working on structured social skill sessions this school year, but those are structured. And we've been really struggling with engaging in the regular education setting. We've been struggling to engage in spontaneous communication skills. It might be really appropriate for us to target that social skills development and say, while their academics are behind, they're not showing regression in those areas over breaks of time. And they're pretty much on grade level academically, but their social emotional skills are the real deficit here. So let's talk about those skills and let's focus on that target for the summer and how we're going to focus that in a most appropriate program for them. Any questions right now? And then also suggesting programs. Sometimes you would be surprised how well it's received when you say to a district, hey, I heard about this program. I think it actually would match Johnny's needs. Here it is. Did you look it up? And sometimes you'll be surprised. I think sometimes parents are scared to tell districts, like, I want you to think about a different program, but you say ABC program is available and I think it meets my kid's needs. I think a lot of times you get a really positive response from a district because they say, "Hey, actually, that makes sense. Like this really works." Not always, trust me, not always, but sometimes just having that conversation of like, did we even talk about this, or was it a kind of like a rubber stamp approval of ESY and no real conversation about what the child really needs to target. How will that team respond? Like I said, they might be open to the discussion and they might shut it down immediately. We don't know. Um, if they shut it down, really challenge them. Your biggest voice, you are your child's biggest voice. So as a parent, you have to advocate for what you think your child needs. So really talk about, wait, you don't think this is appropriate, but tell me why. Why is this not individualized for their needs? And see what they say. I think it's surprising sometimes. Even I've heard this conversation even when I'm in meetings of, well, that's the ESY program. That's what we offer. That's what we have. Well, but is that what Johnny needs? Do we talk about what Johnny needs, or do we talk about what the district does? That's a different conversation, right? Those are two very separate things. What does Johnny need, and what does the district do or offer? This is an individualized program, should be individualized for Johnny's needs. Again, if they refuse your program, request a program, they must issue a NORAP rejecting your proposed program. They issue a NORAP no matter what, but specifically if they reject your program, they must be very explicit they've rejected what you've offered. Ask them. So let's see here. This is what a NORAP looks like. I just did a template NORAP. Again, these documents are going to be available to Charisse once the presentation is done, so you'll be able to look at this a little bit more closely. And I'm going to try, I think I can annotate. Here we go. Okay, so here is one of the really big important areas here. I am going to annotate this here as box number 7. If you look at this NORAP, it has our child's name. We have extended school year. This is what this NORAP is doing, is looking at extended school year services and determining what he needs. An explanation of what they did. These are the options considered. Johnny demonstrates qualifications for ESY. And this box number 7, this is the one that says what the program is, okay? The district proposes ESY for summer 2025 at the district, July 7th to July 31st, with some dates. So obviously just standard. I've mocked this up. So this is what they propose and the action they plan on taking. When you get this form, if you reject that or if you disagree with that, here's your consent. This is your standard NORAP. So when you disagree with a program, you can always request an informal meeting. You can approve it, obviously, or you can do not approve. And you indicate why you don't approve. You think the district should consider a different program. And then what you want from that. This is a standard NORAP you get for any time you get an IEP, but specifically for ESY, this should be generally what you're looking at and what your options are for rejecting it. If any time you are looking to reject a NORAP or reject a placement for a program, consulting with someone is always a good idea. So you know your next steps and your legal rights for rejecting a program and seeking either mediation or due process. Okay. Yep, there you go. I annotated it for you, but I forgot that I'd already annotated it. Oh, let's see here. Okay. This is the third page, the third and fourth pages of the NORAP, just so you know what the full document looks like. Here is where you sign. You do have to sign a NORAP, whether it's approving or denying. You always have to indicate your name and signature on that. So again, I'm going to give a list of options. Again, big statement out here. These are not programs that we are affiliated with or any kind of recommendations or preferences for any of these programs. These are just meant to be helpful and not exhaustive. So two programs, I have several programs listed. Camp AIM through Carnegie, in Carnegie, PA. It's through the YMCA. Adventure Camp in Zelienople, which is run through Glade Run. This is a pretty intense outdoor camp. They offer equine therapy. It works on social skills. They have a good background in autism. Camp AIM is a pretty large scope as far as the disabilities they service. Again, when you get this document, Charisse, we'll make sure, but There is actually hyperlinks in here that'll take you to the website, so you'll be able to actually educate yourselves as parents of what these programs are. Um, JCC, J&R camps. JCC has three different locations across the city. So JCC is the Jewish Community Center, but they have a J&R camp, which is actually supported by an ABA modality. So they have BCBA support and they have trained individuals working there in those programs. It is inclusive, meaning it is a fully regular education camp that has students with disabilities intermixed in, and they have appropriate supports for those students with disabilities. They do field trips, they stay on site, etc. New Story Schools, located in Monroeville, provides this variety of supports through ABA approach. Camp Laugh a Lot is in Washington County, and it's provided through the ARC of Washington County. They typically have a lot of students with some significant intellectual disabilities, but they have a variety of services as well. The Woodlands Foundation is located in Wexford. I want to highlight this only for clarity on this. They offer a bunch of different programs, including overnight programs. ESY does not include overnight. So while some programs might offer sleeping services, overnight services, overnight is not ESY. So if you're looking to get a program approved that is overnight, typically you're not going to immediately get that approved for ESY. The day program, what would be your standard day, would be the portion that you're looking for from your district and be looking for them to offer and provide. Yes, Taryn, I will definitely do that. Yep. Okay, and then that is just a variety of options available. Again, that list was not exhaustive, but I want to ask, what are the questions? What do you guys have? What are you thinking? Again, I think this is more beneficial when you guys can ask questions. We have a little over 10 minutes left. I think that it's more fruitful for us to discuss options that you're thinking about or things that you have experienced to try to figure out. What is the biggest concern in this area for you guys? Is there any piece of this that didn't make sense or that we'd like me to go back to discuss in more detail or to review? I know I typically am pretty long-winded, but I want to make sure that I actually address what you as parents are most concerned with.
And if you are uncomfortable unmuting yourself, you can feel free to add those questions to the chat as well. We are monitoring that.
One thing about those inclusion camps and those the community-based camps I think I want to just highlight is for our students with more significant behavioral difficulties. Um, let's talk about what those services would include. So I have a kiddo in school who has autism, and they require a one-on-one aid during the school day, during the school year. That means that they can't go to summer camp without a one-on-one aid, okay? So if your student has that need during the school year, for a district to suggest they don't need it during the summer would be inappropriate. So if we're talking about a program in the summer and we go, well, how would they do that? They can't do that independently. Well, that's right, they can't because they need a one-on-one aid in district. That's your obligation. That would be what FAPE would be for your student in extended school year. So like, for example, one of the programs I highlighted for students that is inclusive is the JCC J&R camps. Those programs, a lot of students go with one-on-one aids. That is appropriate. It's necessary to be included. Camp AIM, same way. And sometimes those one-on-one aids, I know a lot of families do this kind of the path of least resistance a lot of times, I should say, or at least that's the way I think about it, through their medical assistance program or through their IBHS program with their registered behavior techs, or so your RBT or your TSS, whatever school of in-home services you're currently receiving. And those programs end up providing your one-on-one and providing those supports. That could be qualified as an ESY service, and that's something worth exploring. Because if you're a family that's using your in-home services for your child to go to camp, what does that mean? You don't get those in-home services at home now. You only get them at school or at that camp. And so if your child has a limited number of hours or you're fighting with insurance to get appropriate approval, that might mean you're not getting the help at home too. So just again, another factor I wanted to make sure I highlighted as we talk about these inclusion camps.
Hi, Brandi. My name is Taryn Santamaria. I'm a psychologist in the Down Syndrome Center, and I've been talking with a lot of families about ESY recently. So thank you for bringing that up. Do you see a lot of districts that are willing to pay for a camp as opposed to their like in-district ESYs?
Yes. It's very much a case-by-case basis, Dr. Santamaria, but it is absolutely done on a continuous basis. And it's because it's a program, if that meets a child's need for FAPE, then the team needs to be discussing it and considering it. I think too many times parents are unsure what to ask for. And so districts kind of come at them with, this is the answer, this is what we're doing. And then parents are kind of nervous to advocate for it, or they're afraid to say, well, this program should be paid for. Of the options I've listed here, of the ones, again, no affiliation, no allegiance to any of them, I have heard of, experienced students attending all of these camps through an ESI program.
Oh, that's wonderful. I often hear from families that they have tried to get, for example, their child to be able to participate in Camp AIM, and one year the district allowed it, but then the next year they refused to pay for it. So I think that that's a conversation that a lot of our families end up having with districts, because oftentimes they want something that is like more meaningful throughout the summer, longer days, more than just the few weeks of the ESY, and that has a larger social component with same age peers and those things too.
Absolutely. And what I will tell you is that if your district provided a program one summer and the next summer unilaterally said, nope, you can't have that program. So the example that Dr. Santamaria just gave was that a family had had received services for extended school year at a community-based program via their IEP one school year, and then the new school year they received a NORAP saying, nope, you can't go to that community-based program anymore. That's actually a violation of the law. So the last agreed upon program is the placement for a student. So that talks about students in full-time special education or not full-time special education during the school year. That also talks about your extended school year. So if the last agreed upon program was a community-based program and there's no data, discussion, or evidence as to why the program is changing, that's a problem. So if you have a family hitting that road, that's a time when they should reach out to someone and consult about what their options are legally. Because a district unilaterally, like we talk about what the law said, I'm gonna actually take this down because I feel like maybe. So if we talk about the law said, ESI program can't be at the convenience and it can't be a unilateral decision. So if a district just immediately tells you, oh, we're not doing camp whatever this summer now, so now your child comes in district, that's a problem. And that's a conversation that should be discussed. Remember, I do, again, kind of like an asterisk on this. If you got that NORAP, if you read that NORAP that we had up there, there's a 10-day timeline. So you have to respond to that. So if you get a NORAP, that means anytime you see a NORAP, that means I got to act. I got to do something with this because I only have 10 days to reject that. If I don't reject that, our consent is accepted, especially for it, but for a few situations. But for ESY programming, if you don't respond to that, it's going to be difficult to battle that. So you want to make sure you're acting very quickly when you're receiving those NORAPs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any questions about like the meaningful progress and their goals throughout the school year. Because that I connected that directly to ESY, but I think that's important for us to think about for our entire school year for students with IEPs. You're welcome, Kate. Thank you for joining. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I will echo Kate's comment there and say thank you so much, Brandi. I know we only have 2 minutes left, but you will be coming back next month and
I'll
doing
be.
another presentation with us and digging a little deeper. Do you want to give a quick, like, 1 minute summary
Um,
on what topics you might be
Possibly.
hitting?
I actually, hold on, I can. Give me 1 second, because Sharice and I discussed this, and I have to refresh my memory of what it was, what we confirmed. So I want to make sure I give you the right information. Next month, we're going to be looking at inclusion. What does it mean and how do we do it? Especially for our kiddos that the Down Syndrome Association works with. Inclusion is usually a really hot button issue. A lot of our children are not included. So we're going to be diving into inclusion and how we can include our kids and what inclusion actually means, and not just the we call it inclusion, but what does it actually mean? So we'll dive into that deeper. And then, of course, if anyone has any questions between now and then on this topic, you can reach out to me. Sharice is going to post my information. Again, I'm from my extraordinary law. You can look me up, Brandi Suter, and I'd be happy to help any of you. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate. I'm glad that you all appreciated the information.
Yeah, thank you, Brandi. And for everybody who's online, just want to let you all know that we will have some programming coming up related to World Down Syndrome Day, since we are a little bit under 1 month out, or over 1 month out from that. So keep an eye. We're going to have weekend art activities for the community, culminating in an art exhibit at the right after World Down Syndrome Day. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody at those events. And Brandi, we're looking forward to having you back in a month to talk about inclusion.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks. Bye, everybody.